Hello, Ithra. Hello, Tanween. It's lovely to be here. My name is Markos Kirsch, and today I'll talk to you about wicked companies and wicked ideas for the next 20 or so minutes. And I will wrap it up a little bit in three little parts, which is what is a wicked company, why should you care, and talk a little bit about problems and uncertainties. So what is a wicked company? Like, modern organizations are missing the capability to solve wicked problems. Wicked problems are type of problems that are like moving targets. So there's problems that don't move and problems that do. And often it is because there's people who sort of fit in or not fit in, and I'm going to talk a little bit about me, how I got to this wicked problem stuff maybe first. So a lot of us have the issue sometimes to fit into different contexts, and we move through different contexts all through our lives, and that's pretty much true for me. And I ended up fitting into too many places, and now I have a lot of them. So I do lots of different things. Last year, for example, I started running, and last Tuesday, I ended up running my first half marathon. I was like, okay, I'm doing something, it's working. And then 4 days later, this guy ran a whole marathon in 2 hours. And I was like, okay, it's good to do something new. And I think the really nice thing about this is that it just puts things into context. You actually get a better feel for what this man was achieving, because I tried my little part in a very bad way, and this is what he did. And it's been like that my whole life, where I tried a lot of different things, and I got different reactions. So when I was younger, I was learning ballroom dancing, for example. And at the same time, I was doing skateboarding, which confused a lot of people because of the way you dress, the way you do things. They all seem to not quite match together, and there seem to be different things seemingly unconnected. This went on. I eventually learned to be a designer, and then I learned how to be a computer coder. At the time, over 20 years ago, 25 years ago, this was not a usual thing to fit together. They were very far away pieces that are slowly now coming better together. So I ended up having this kind of background, a really multicolored, very varied, eclectic kind of background that sometimes confuses people. Sometimes people look like, wow, that's interesting. And the truth is probably somewhere in the middle. So because I've worked in a lot of industries, I've found that a lot of companies don't have the ability to look into all these different pieces. And I believe that the ability to look in all these different pieces gives you a more holistic view of the world. And I think it's utterly necessary to have that view, that mindset, in order to solve wicked problems. So a little bit more about what wicked problems really are. So wicked is a word that can mean two things. If you're not living in England or Australia, you probably know the word wicked in translation as something evil, but that's not the only meaning. The other meaning is also that it's something playfully mischievous, quite nicely fitting into the theme today. It's something that you can work around. You have to be tricky, creative, something around to work your way around it. And so it's a really nice sense that it's not just a bad thing. It can be also a good thing to figure out. In very simple terms, a wicked problem is one that is a moving target, something that you don't know quite enough about to really start finding a solution, or something that actually, while you're working on the solution, it will evolve. Any problem that includes a lot of people, for example, has a tendency to be a wicked problem. If we're looking at reducing crime, how diseases are spreading, those are all kind of things that have a lot of moving parts that just keep moving while you're trying to solve things. Tame problems are rather simple in comparison. A bridge is a good example for a tame problem. It has 2 points, you need to connect them. You put the bridge there. While you're building the bridge, it doesn't change. After the bridge is there, the problem is solved. It will not evolve into new problems most of the time. Tame problems are very much something we discovered a lot during the Industrial Revolution. The replication of a lot of different objects and products was a tame problem because you just have to replicate the same thing, do the same thing again, same thing again. The way Henry Ford solved doing that was with a process he called de-skilling. We all know the conveyor belts and the factories, but I only came across that in some research some years ago, and I was quite impressed by what it actually means, because it means that what he took was, if we have a craft and we do something, when we have the way our mindset works around the problem to solve, and the tangible skill we're doing in order to build something, they're normally interwoven. One informs the other, and we keep learning. What he did was to separate it. So you had the factory workers in the factories doing simple, small skills that they could all learn very quickly. They didn't have to think about it. And he said, well, management up there, they will make all the decisions. They will be the brain of it. The benefit of that was that he created the ability to hire cheap labor by the thousands, created factories to produce products by the thousands. And this structure has informed our organizations up until today, and we still feel that echo, and also the downsides of that. Back when we had crafts, and so this is a picture of a carpenter from Germany, and when they normally used their skills, they would practice it somewhere, and then they would have these Wanderjahre, like the journeyman years, where they would travel around and they learn same or similar and different, often different procedures in different cities. So they would travel around for a few years and learn new things by shifting context. This is something we don't do anymore. We often just stick to the departments and the silos we're working in, and we're stuck to them. So the same for everyone worked really well during the Industrial Revolution for us, but we've solved that. We can produce millions and billions of products and copies of copies very, very easily. One thing to understand of the difference between a tame and a wicked problem is that complexity is not what makes it a wicked problem. A tame problem can be really complex. Building an airplane is a very complex, tame problem. It's still an airplane. It's not going to change. The way it flies once it starts is all the same. Same parameters apply. Now, wicked problems are where these parameters are actually changing. If you see these new bots they have on the stock market, that's a perfect example of a wicked problem. Not only have you created an object that does something as a solution for the context it works in this case, bots buying and selling stocks. But whatever the bots are doing influences other bots, influences human beings on the stock market. They start to react to each other, and they create different behaviors that, again, because they learn from each other, and they start reacting differently, which means the original context you designed the bot for is different once the bot starts working on it. So that's the perfect example of a wicked problem that just keeps evolving, keeps changing. So to simplify it, I'll give you a definition. So a wicked problem is a problem that is difficult or impossible to solve because of incomplete, contradictory, and changing requirements. A moving target is the most simplest way I figured to explain this. A tame problem, instead, has a fixed set of parameters. Therefore, the solutions can often be achieved by finding the right algorithm, finding the right principles and rules to apply, and you can apply them again and again because the problem doesn't change. And I believe there's evidence that we're living in a world that creates increasingly more wicked problems around us because of the devices we are using. The mobile phones we have, the fact that we communicate now. When I send out a post, I can communicate to 1 million people. It will affect them, the information they have, the actions they take afterwards. Even on a very personal level, with a basic example like a mobile phone shows you that the new problems tend to be more wicked and more evolving while we're working on that. And therefore, I believe we need more wicked companies that can solve these kind of problems more. So to summarize that there's a tame problem, a lot of them that we had and solved during the Industrial Revolution, and the wicked problems of today that are ever-evolving ones, that we don't have quite organizations yet, I believe, or we need better organizations to solve those. Why should you care? Tame problems because they can be replicated, the solution of them can be replicated and multiplied, they can get automated. This is the big fear we hear about all the time. Where are these jobs going? Well, they're getting automated because the actual task to do can be created or replicated with an algorithm. It's solved once, then it can be solved 1,000,000 times, and you don't need any extra effort. Those things will all disappear. And they should maybe, because they were a bit of a drag to start doing them in the first place. So we can maybe spend more time on more interesting problems, wicked problems. Therefore, wicked problems are becoming the new marketplace. If we look at a lot of new companies, a lot of startups and so on, they're all looking at that kind of space. It's a more complex, a more moving, a more evolving kind of problem space that they are starting to provide solutions for. This is a graphic I found that by a company called intercom.com, and it shows a little bit the mindset that is actually at play when you compare a tame to a wicked organization. So all the customer here wants, or the user wants, is to ride a skateboard and do some tricks. The company supplying the ability to do so often still thinks in the bits and pieces of the product and not in the actual outcome. So product thinking, by definition, is a fairly classic approach of trying to bring a solution. A solution is not just a product. It involves a lot of different things that might be way more complex. And the more progressive companies are starting to think like that, and they will include in their offer something that goes beyond the product, which is likely why we have such a surge in more services and the service economy. This graphic, which is a mix from a couple of books, but essentially the initial origin of that is in the book, The Experience Economy, is showing how we evolved our products into products and services from commodities, and gives a bit of a projection of what could happen next. And I believe there's some companies already out there doing that. We just haven't quite found a name for how this new economy is called. So we start with commodities, just digging the bits and pieces out of the ground sometimes. We eventually turned them into products, sold those products. Eventually we turned the products into services, and then we built bigger experiences around those services, always driving the margins of the market, always driving a new and bigger value in the market. And the next step is very likely to be seen that the next bigger margin sits above the experience. What's above the experience? Well, it's a more complex experience that solves your problem better, maybe to a point where you don't have to engage with it anymore. It works itself in the background and gives you convenience through that. But it's definitely something that is exponentially more valuable than some of the current experiences that we're trying to design and build. So trying to bring a bit of structure into how this maybe could look like as a sketch in a company, and some of the aspects I've been working on projects helping companies change and transform into. So if you look back at the craftswomen of the olden days, they would work very closely with the customer of like, what do you need? Like this and this, in which context? And they would often make a very bespoke solution on that. So the distance between the reality and what was manufactured was pretty much next to each other. With the Industrial Revolution, this started to change. So de-skilling separated the making from the thinking. So you started to have a making layer, you have a smart management, and then eventually some more reality. And in between those layers, you had to translate so that everyone understands what to make. Today, we're looking a little bit into something like that, still very simplified, but you have the reality, someone draws some hypothesis from the reality, somewhere you have departments and different aspects that trying to solve different pieces of the reality. They're all sitting in different kind of silos, and eventually somewhere you have leadership that gets some information from various different points, combines it into some strategy, and tries to push this back into reality. And I think we all know that the silo effect can be very detrimental, because every step of the way you have information and knowledge loss, and you're actually not able to understand a possibly likely very, very complex problem. So innovation, for example, it does not thrive in silos. We sort of all know that, but the question is, what can we do about it? Can we change organizations in a way that this works better? We have, because of all the silos and the different practices now involved in organizations, all the specializations that have been evolved since the Industrial Revolution, we have a lot of different languages. They're not just cultural, they're not just by country, they're actually by practice. Someone might write the word blue, someone might have just the color blue. It's a different means, and it's an abstraction level of trying to do exactly the same thing, and I've been in so many moments where this applied, where I looked at people and it was like, you're saying the same thing, but you're talking a different language. How can we bring these languages back together? So some of the practices I'm looking at the moment are systems thinking, enterprise architecture, business design, change management, service design, transformation. They're all doing the same thing, trying to solve problems. They all speak in different languages, and they have to start bringing this back together. It affects learning. Ernst & Young has looked at the statistic and says the way we learn, because it's also too silent and too much trained towards the factories, is just not efficient in order to prepare someone to be successful in an organization. 70% is in the workplace in that context. So we have to do a lot there too. In the workplace, this is sort of, the reality that we have, the diversity that we actually have, and not just our usual business structure with a couple of departments and that. There's so much complexity going on, which is by itself a wicked problem. How do you get all these people work together and respect each other and be happy together? And there's a lot of new efforts in trying to build new organizations that takes that into account and builds teams very, very differently. Here's some of the some quotes I have from people I interviewed for my book and people I work with. So Rachel Heim over at BT, where I worked for a year, she said, I need more agility for my teams. She has 14,000 developers, and it's really hard for her to spin up a team to throw it at a problem. It's really hard because the organization is too rigid. Tim Carmichael works for the British Army. He was chief data officer. He said, we started to problem solve horizontally. We don't use silos anymore. It has shown to us that this is not the way forward. And that's the military, a very hierarchical organization, telling you that that's not the future anymore. Haley from Airbnb said, our journey is never ending, so we don't even stop. Like, we keep doing these things. We keep mixing up things. We keep bringing things together, because every time we solve a problem, we have another one. Every time we change and shift a feature on our service, it spawns up new things, new opportunities and new problems. About banking group, the same thing. We have really complex problems we want to solve. We want to go into problem solving, and it's the biggest task at hand at this point, in this case for a big banking group. So one of the examples I very quickly want to talk about is BT. BT IT in particular is a big company with 14,000 developers and many more people. And I went in there with a team of about 20 people, and we got in there and trained up 200 design thinkers, 4,000 people involved in new ways of working, and managed to, by learning by doing, create 30 services and 14 teams within a year's time in order to massively improve the flexibility that BT itself has. It's been so successful that it's now been rolled out to BT's global services, and they keep growing the amount of people that actually learn from this and actually get involved in these new ways of working. And it's been a really great success. And people can do it. People can learn it. I've never worked with so many non-designers in my life, and I have to say it was the best time in my life. And the way we approach this is pretty much this. So you have the reality, you have hypothesis and a problem funnel, and you throw teams at it. And the main thing then to realize is you need to support these teams with all the bits and pieces they need. A team alone cannot solve it by themselves. The support system is really important. So we don't think in departments anymore. We actually dock on and off valuable capabilities and skills that we need on a temporary basis. It's a much more fluent system, and it worked so far really well. So what I'm trying to say here is maybe that the wicked problem solving is a world or a mindset where uncertainty plays a big, big role, and you have to start to become very comfortable with uncertainties. But the second you start stepping in there and you become part of a team like that that has the right support, it actually becomes less scary and it becomes actually fun. And you feel more purpose in your job. And I think there's a lot of value that drives these things that I've seen in projects, and for me, it makes me believe in that wicked problem solving and wicked organizations are the way forward. And that's my story.
Thank you, Mr. Marcus. That was wicked.
Thank you, Robert.
All right, we'd like to see if any of our audiences have questions. Of course, Zain has a question right over here. In the middle. Any more questions after Zain? Over here. All right, great.
Yes, hello. Thank you for the talk. I want to ask, so do you think that the newer generation should start getting into majors that are more for wicked problem solvings? And if so, what are majors and jobs that are for wicked problem solving instead of tame problems? Thank you.
So that's a really interesting question, thank you. So the thing is this, let me give you an example. I believe that roles and job descriptions will become very, very different. A lot of them are very skills-based, and I think that's not the future. They should be outcome-based. Interestingly enough, since I arrived here on Tuesday, I had from a lot of people here, like the way we work here at ITHRA is actually, this is my job description, it actually doesn't matter. I have to do a lot of different things. It's much more like a startup, which is really refreshing. And so you actually throw a lot of different pieces of what you know into it, yet your role description is nearly irrelevant, because you work on an outcome, and everyone contributes. So that's one way of looking at the thing. The other thing is also in terms of organization, steps they can take. So I had a chat with Mr. Powell he was the vice president of design over at IBM, and he said they just hired 4,000 new designers globally because they want to become more design-driven. And they found that they actually need to redefine the careers they have for designers and for some developers in order to achieve better results in their outcome-based team. So they embraced it, but they have had to start to look into it. So my recommendation, therefore, would be go into companies, talk to them of what you like to do. I think the right companies will actually listen to you and probably go like, yeah, that's great, we can do something with you here, right? The companies that might be still very classic and are not quite mature for that yet, they will probably not recognize that. I had a lot of conversations, because my background is both in design and technology, where it was like, which one are you? I was like, I'm both. You get both. And it was confusing and it did not work. And those places normally were not that mature to work at. So I would say go to companies you like, see the outcome, what they're producing, and talk to them would be my recommendation.
Okay, great. And we have one more question over here, please, on my left.
Hi there, thanks so much for such an insightful speech. You kind of answered the question that I was going to ask, but it was more around what kind of skills do you look for when you're employing people to kind of tackle these wicked problems, and how does that translate into the recruitment process? Yeah,
so apart from the fact that talking about roles, it's actually that I want to, and whoever company wants to get involved in this, I want to try that as an experiment to actually completely redefine how we describe a role, how we look for a position. Personally, I'm quite lucky. I work with a lot of people. I know a lot of people who generally have a tendency to be quite open in their skill set. So I think the main thing is open mind. You're driven. You're interested because you want to achieve the outcome is probably the simplest answer. And if you want to do that, it gets easily into the area of being an entrepreneur, right? Because entrepreneurs, they want to achieve something, they don't care how they get there. They need to learn something, or they need to get that knowledge in. It doesn't matter, right? So it's that kind of, I think, attitude I'm looking for. I'm a bit lucky in London. There's a fair share of people like that, or people like me tend to find each other eventually. But it's drive, I think. It's an open mindset, and I think that above everything makes you learn all your life and makes you get there eventually. So that's a great gift to have, or a great skill to learn.
All right, great. Thank you so much, Mr. Marcus, for being with us today. Thank you so much. That was very helpful.